We are in section 5, and we have the beginning of the story, of the taker story, our story. We are takers, each of us. Man or humans that are takers believe that the world was made for us, for humans, to do whatever we want with it, and it is our destiny to conquer the world and all life on it. Okay? So now that civilization's in place, we're conquering the world. We're almost done it. The problem is, no matter what happens, the world just doesn't get conquered the way we want it to. Right? You know? We realize that we need more and more science, more and more technology to make things do the way we want them to. The more we industrialize, the more erratic and the weather becomes, the more things die. So what is our answer? Well, we've got to become better masters. We've got to conquer better. We've got to come up with more science and technology to let us keep doing the things we do that destroy the world. Because, once we have complete control, once we're like gods, we can control everything. We can get rid of those tornadoes, those pesky hurricanes, those dry summers, those overly wet rains. We can control it all. Right? Because we can be God. Okay? That's the fault of our thinking. The world was made for us to conquer and rule, and under our rule it was meant to become paradise. But the problem is, every time we talk about paradise, it's typically like the Caribbean, some blue ocean water island that's untouched by civilization. Nature is paradise. In fact, if you remember, it's not until Adam and Eve, and by the way, in ancient Semitic, Adam means all of humankind and Eve means life. It's not until Adam and Eve, commit to agriculture and the original sin of civilization that they are thrown out of paradise, that they lose paradise. And just so you know, just because I keep coming back to the Adam and Eve thing, let me just kind of explain real quick. So, much of the Bible works on allegory. In an allegory, you have your literal meaning versus your allegorical representation. So you all know probably the story of Adam and Eve literally, but I'll tell it anyway. Okay, basically you got Adam and Eve. They were made by God, first humans, whatever. And all of a sudden, this snake comes up, and the evil snake tempts Eve, that evil woman who ruined it all for us. He tempts her to eat the magical fruit, which gives you the knowledge of the gods. But of course, it's called the tree of the knowledge of gods. It's also called the tree of good and evil. But it doesn't work out well for Adam and Eve because they're disobedient. They are doomed to die. God says to them, for this you shall die, which of course you interpret to mean, will become mortal. That's what you've been taught your whole life. It was the point at which humans were somehow magically immortal, which there's no evidence of that in the world or science or anywhere. And then all of a sudden humans become mortal. Right? And he threatens them very specifically. He threatens Eve with the pains of birth. He threatens the snake to always slither on its stomach. He threatens, he basically says, like I said earlier, forever shall you toil in the soil. For thistle and thorn will it sprout for you, its bread will not nourish you until you return to the dust which you have become. Dust from which you were made. Okay, all right, so let's talk about that as an allegory. Now, this is the part where sometimes people get upset, but look, here are the facts. Everywhere, but with your white Europeans, the snake does not represent evil. In the Middle East and Native Americans and Asia, the snake represents intelligence and wisdom. In fact, I can prove this very simply. If you look at the symbol for medical knowledge that comes from the Greeks, that's often on ambulances and doctor badges, it is a staff entwined with two snakes. The snakes represent intelligence and wisdom. Okay? Now, the story of Adam and Eve, all these stories come way before the Jews. All kinds of tribal people pass these stories back and forth for, 60,000 years before a written language ever exists. And some of those people, the main groups, were the ancient Hittites and the ancient ancestors of the Hebrews, the ancient Semites. And in their languages, Adam means all humans. Then when he gets the honorary title ending, which we don't really have that in Europe, that's more like a China, Middle East thing, where he becomes Adamah, that actually means soil, which is interesting. It makes a lot more sense now. God blew his life into soil. But Adam means all of humankind, and Eve means life. So all of humankind, Adam, was tempted by life and intelligence and wisdom to eat the fruit of the knowledge of the gods, the fruit of the tree of good and evil. So you have to ask yourself, what is that? Why fruit? Well, the tree itself represents agriculture. The knowledge of good and evil, the knowledge of the gods, is simply this. What knowledge do gods have that we don't? How to rule successfully, we think. Right? So how do you rule? Well, you decide what things are good and get rewarded, or get to proliferate, or you plant more of, or you pat on the head for behavior, or bad. You destroy, you punish. That is the knowledge. We convinced ourselves, humans convinced ourselves, that we have the knowledge of God. We get to decide what insects, what plants, what humans, what animals get rewarded and which ones get punished. Which ones get killed, which ones get to live, which ones we breed more of, which ones we fence off and leave out, which plants we grow, which plants we pluck, right? To conquer, how to conquer. And the allegorical meaning of this is that original sin is civilization, because as a consequence of this, God punishes Adam, you shall die, plural, you shall become extinct, through agriculture. He curses them with agriculture. Forever will you grow things in the soil to feed your ever-growing population, till eventually it will not nourish you anymore, and you shall die. You shall become dust again. You, your species, will become extinct. And that's what the story of Adam and Eve is all about. We're going to go into more of this later. So it's not that humans ever got kicked out of paradise. It's that this is what we turn paradise into. And it fits with the idea that we see nature as chaos when actually it's complete order. And we see civilization as order when actually it's complete chaos. I mean, just look at what's going on right now in the world. And that's the lie we've told ourselves. So the taker story, the lie that we're living is the world was made for man to conquer and rule, and under human rule, it was meant to become a paradise. Now, you know what the ending is. Because, extinction. We all die. We were bound to screw it up. And why are we bound to screw it up? Because we are flawed. But this is interesting because believers don't believe in flaws. I've never met a baby that was born evil, how it was flawed. But the story that we tell ourselves due to religion is that we are flawed. Well, a lever, the ancient, like you would think Native Americans who lived in harmony with nature, for our 3 million years of human existence, the people who lived in harmony with nature, they say that we are not flawed. If you live a flawed story, then you live a messed up life. So, it's something to consider. One thing that's really interesting is that takers always are dependent on profits. Why do we need profits? Because civilization is so messed up that we have to have people to tell us how to live, what's right and wrong. So takers, civilization tells us that there is no way to know what's right or wrong. You have to have special magical people to tell you. Well, you won't be surprised to know that levers feel the exact opposite of that. And levers don't have profits. They never have profits. They only have profits when civilization comes along and wipes them out, commits genocide, and then they create a profit that's going to somehow save them or bring revenge, which, never happens. So the problem is we argue and argue, like the book says here, whether or not pot should be legal or not, or whatever, abortion. And we use these prophets to tell us what the one right way to live is, and we can't come up with it. It never knows. They tell us it's the one right way to live, but everybody argues about it over and over again. Well, leavers, it will surprise you to learn, maybe have the exact opposite. There is no one right way to live. There are many right way to live, and you can figure out how. You just have to look at what's out there. You have to study. You have to learn. You have to observe life and get out of your own headspace for a while. Right? Okay. All right. So now we're in section 6. Okay. And I guess the important thing to talk about here is this knowledge of how to live. Look, by the end of this book, you're going to have the answers of how you can live in harmony with Earth and never go extinct, how you can reverse climate change, how you can stop the extinction of animals. But you're not going to do it. You're not going to do it. You're going to be given the answers at the end of this book, and you're not going to care. And this is, or maybe you will for a while, and then you'll kind of quit, whatever. But this is one thing that's really interesting, is this idea of how did people learn how to fly. And I have a neat video you have to watch. This about humans learning how to fly and the early disasters that occur. But see, we didn't know. We didn't know about the law of aerodynamics. We had to learn how to fly. And so how do you learn how to fly? You know, what are the law of aerodynamics? And essentially, you know, it's a nature law. You know, it's basically if you have a flat wing and you move air, you know, you move it forward at a fast rate into air, air goes over and under the wing. And if you create a slight slant, you get lift. So speed, flat space with a slight slant, plus air moving, you know, and you fly. But we didn't know how to do this. We had to go through experimentation. So trial and error was how we discovered the laws of nature. Well, one thing that Ishmael is pointing out here is, you know, trial and error is, you know, a good way to maybe learn how to fly, because like only one person can die in a plane at a time. But when you're talking about civilization and how to live on Earth as a species, and you're playing with trial and error, and our big trial here is civilization, that's our early plane, you know, if there's a disaster, a lot more people than one die. You know, whole species die. Okay, so what we're looking for here is a law of how to live life. Okay, so he asked the narrator, well, how do you study that? What do you look for? Well, if you want to law gravity, what do you look at? You know, you look at the magnetism and the way things are attracted to each other. You know, if you want to study, you know, thermodynamics, you study fire and heat. But if you want to study how to live life, what do you study? You study animals. Now takers will tell you that there is no right way to live life. That can't be discovered. And in fact, it's crazy to me that we don't have a major in it. That's not something we study. And it is. It definitely is something that you can study. You know, we study it a little bit in anthropology, but really we don't have something that combines everything together under one philosophy of how to live life as like a major. So what do you study? You study everything else on this planet. If you want to learn how to live life successfully, let's look at the species that have been here for millions of years, for billions of years. Let's study them. Let's study the community of life. And by doing that, we will discover these laws of nature. Okay? Now the problem is, if we need to discover how to save our lives from extinction, from planetary collapse, then where are we going to look for that? We didn't learn how to find the law of aerodynamics until it became relevant, until we wanted to fly. So, you know, will we look for this community of how to live life, this law of how to live life and not kill ourselves? Will we do that until we have to? Or, you know, we're the one species that can think ahead and do it now. Now, I will keep talking about laws, and I do want to mention there are 3 kinds of laws. There's laws of nature, which can't be broken, like gravity. You can't stop gravity. I mean, you can exert enough force to go past it, you know, to push beyond its pull, but that's simple mathematics. You're not ending gravity. It's still pulling you. You've just defeated it with thrust forward. That's how spaceships take off. You have moral law, which people agree on, and disagree on, which can change from culture to culture, which can be broken. People can break moral laws. And then you have legal laws, which definitely differ from culture to culture and aren't always moral. They also can be broken. But natural laws cannot be broken. Something, important here to mention. Okay. There's also talk in this section of the 3 dirty tricks that the gods play on humans. And this is really another allegory, a metaphor, because the gods aren't actual gods. We're talking about a metaphor here. There's some kind of humans. I'll leave that up for you in your discussion of who those gods represent. Are they us? Are they our religious leaders? Are they our political leaders? Kings, royalty, the powerful, the rich? Who is it? But the first trick that they played on us, or we played on ourselves, is this. We're not the center of the universe. It's not all about us. There are other things out there. We're not even the center of our own galaxy. But we told ourselves we were that important. Or did civilization and its leaders tell us that? Okay, the second trick of the gods is that, and this is the one that kind of makes people upset, we don't get our own special creation story. Even if you look at the story of Adam and Eve, all those other animals and insects and things were created just like God creates Adam and Eve, right? I mean, we get a little bit more detail with Adam and Eve, but it's still created and not even created first. And if you're thinking about evolution, we don't get our own creation story that's special there either. We evolved just like everything else evolved, very slow over great amounts of time. So again, it's not all about us. We don't have any special creation story even. Even among religions, things created just like everything else. But here's the last trick. We are not immune to the laws of nature. We're subject to them just like a cockroach, just like a jellyfish, just like a lion. And if you break those laws long enough, there's a price. And that's the third trick. We've convinced ourselves there is no price. There is no way to break this. Okay? So, here's the next allegory we get. Imagine, and you'll see from the video I post, some of the early flight devices. One is a bicycle with wings that flap when you pedal, and it has like a tail like a bird, and kind of a pointy front like a bird beak. And these guys are pedaling around on it, trying to get some air. And so we get this metaphor or allegory. Imagine that you're on one of these bikes, and you're about to go off a cliff. Now, you, the human, represent all of humanity, all humans, right? All right. And the bicycle represents civilization, our early attempts at civilization. Now, first, when you go off this cliff, you're like, oh, hell yeah, I'm flying. This is working out. And civilization looked real good at first. It looked like it was going to be great. But then people started noticing there's some pretty bad things that come with this civilization. Genocide, armies, power structure, slavery, disease, famine, alcoholism, drug abuse, crime, social structures, war. And people start seeing rivers get polluted because people are like pooping in them in these massive cities, and people are getting sick. And start noticing that mass production of anything causes damage to the environment. Things start getting wiped out. Species start going extinct. Even in ancient times, people start saying, whoa, this may be a bad idea. This thing we're on, this civilization, might not be flying, might not be working. But people are like, nah, man, it's working good so far. But what are you going to do, jump off? And so, a little ways down around the Industrial Revolution, people start really saying, no, this is bad. The Native Americans said it. All these people said, we're going to destroy the world because of the way we poison things. Factories started poisoning whole cities, whole rivers. People started getting strange diseases. And then people started saying, maybe this civilization thing isn't so great. especially when people started getting over here and conquering the Indians and saw how they live, and people would go native and love freedom of the West before trains and civilization come and ruin it. So then we get a little bit longer to like the 1950s and 60s when we find out for sure that we're doing some massive damage to this planet. And the first climate change scientists start saying, whoa, we got to do something now. And then we start discovering all these other abandoned flying vehicles, civilizations, and the book goes into many. And for instance, there were pyramids here in America, but the Native Americans walked away from civilization because it didn't work. The Mayans collapsed. All these civilizations collapsed. We start seeing the wreckages of this thing we're on, and we know now we are not flying. Civilization's not working. We're falling. But we're so committed to the ride that we won't abandon this vehicle that we're on. Not even until it brings about our ultimate destruction. And that's the allegory that we have here. And finally, we're about to hit rock bottom, Anyways, okay. Well, that's the end of section 6.